Hi, everyone. My name is Ginger Birnbaum, and I'm calling in from Tennessee. So glad that y'all can take this hour for yourselves as we come together to talk about emotional wellness and COVID-19. I am the mother of two children, King, who is 8, and Emma Virginia, who is 11. Our family has been involved with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation since King was diagnosed at birth. Over the years, we have been involved in a lot of different aspects, but one of the things that I am most passionate about is the Foundation's mental health work. I was thrilled one year when I heard a talk given by someone at the Foundation titled, "There is no health without mental health," and recognized that there was more of a focus on emotional wellness. I felt honored to join the Foundation's Mental Health Advisory Committee in 2017 as a community advocate to help with their work in education and training. Our committee has discussed how important emotional wellness is during this uncertain time. And that was the impetus for tonight's event, to share some active tools with the CF community around how to manage the stress and anxiety you might be feeling. And there is no denying that we are living in stress and anxiety-inducing times. I imagine that if we were sitting across from one another in a room, many of you would be nodding your heads. Probably most of you would be. Truly, these are unprecedented times. This human experience that we are sharing changes from day to day. New information continues to roll out. Maybe you or your loved one feels fine one day and not as good the next. Maybe you live on your own and ache for friends and family. Maybe 1 hour you are enjoying your time at home and the next hour, not so much. I do want to make a point to say that I recognize that social isolation is what many CF adults struggle with regularly. The rest of the world is getting a small taste of what that feels like for you all on a daily basis. Children with CF don't feel this as acutely, so I've not experienced it with King, but I know that my CF adult friends know the feeling of isolation all too well. I guess I just want y'all to know that we see you and we honor the path that you are on. Personally, I have found that another hard part of managing this time is that everyone approaches it differently. It takes a lot, like a whole lot, to make me panic. I've wondered if I'm too calm and might regret that later should something bad happen. It's hard to know. We're looking to one another for reassurance and guidance. In physically distanced relationships, it's easy to want to match the pitch of someone else. A friend recently shared something that they read with me. Just like coronavirus, fear is contagious too, but there is a difference. Only a percentage of us will contract coronavirus. Nearly everyone seems afflicted with fear. Overall, I'm trying to work with my children and community to do what I can and accept what I cannot. Of course, that's easier said than done. I know of people who have lost someone to complications from this virus, people that are being hospitalized, friends who have lost jobs, and people that are having a really hard time with physical distancing. This is a time where I imagine there are many, many people who are looking for resources to manage fear and panic. That is why I'm excited to join you all on this call today and to introduce you to two additional members of the Mental Health Advisory Committee, Shana Flair and Stephanie Foligno. We will have time for questions at the end of our time today. So please type whatever questions you have as we go along into the Q&A box. We also invite you to participate in our chat. Two adults with CF, Melissa Schiffman and Chad Reedy, are our chat moderators. Melissa is logging on from New York City, and Chad is joining us from Virginia. They will both be sharing their stories and reactions in the chat and want you to join them. With that, I will turn it over to Shana.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shana Flair. I'm a clinical social worker, and I've worked in cystic fibrosis for a little over 10 years. And currently, I serve as the mental health coordinator at our pediatric and adult programs at the Emory University and Children's Healthcare of Atlanta CF Center. And I'm incredibly grateful to be able to share this time with you all tonight.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stephanie Foligno. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I am embedded in the Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center Pediatric CF Center, and have been the psychologist embedded in the team since 2009. I'm also incredibly proud and honored to be a member of our CF Foundation's Mental Health Advisory Committee, and have been for many years. Thank you so much for coming together with us today. I'm going to start with some of the hopes that we have for today and a little bit of our vision. We know that there is a great deal of uncertainty and change happening right now related to COVID. And while we are in our own respective rooms, we are together. And many of us have been longing for this feeling of understanding, validation, and togetherness. Given that we know that when change occurs and we need to adjust to something unexpected, two of the very best things to help us are some form of structure and a little bit of flexibility. And so we are going to walk through a program tonight, a set of steps that has some structure and has some flexibility. This set of steps is called Face COVID, and it was created by a greatly admired psychologist named Dr. Russ Harris. He created this format to help us walk through some of the steps, and it's grounded and embedded in acceptance and commitment therapy. We will walk through these steps together tonight, and we will practice some of the skills as well. And then, if you find it helpful, you can use this however you think that it will work for you going forward. The pressures of staying healthy, physical distancing, becoming our children's teachers, staying just enough informed but not too much, working from home, being furloughed, making more meals at home than ever before, we certainly all need the help.
Thank you, Stephanie, for framing this so well. And yes, we want to invite you to experiment with some of these skills and to be open to practicing them together with us, to see what works and resonates with you. And we hope that this will help you to find more thriving space, even as the difficulties around us, continue. And so starting with the F in Face COVID, focus on what's in your control. And that seems so obvious, right? But most of us, especially now, are really being inundated and hearing about systemic barriers and national policy issues that have a great deal of impact on us and our families right now. And yet we don't have an immediate sense of personal control over those things. And so it's natural to feel more helpless than we were a month or two ago. And most of us are experiencing more worry than we're probably used to. And so while there's no right amount of worry, I want to bring up another graphic to show you. And as you can see here, that there's sort of a spectrum from worry. And on the left side, you see that normal worry helps us to solve problems in our life, get what we want, helps us to sort of move in the direction we want to be going. And further to the right, in sort of the red zone, excessive worry leaves us feeling demoralized and upset. And I'm sure that we can probably all identify with how exhausting that can be. And when we're depleted and exhausted, it's really hard, to get what we want and do what we need to do. And so excessive worry tends to get in the way of living the life that we want to lead. And so, Ginger, I want to ask you, how does thinking about worry on this spectrum resonate with you? And will you share with us sort of where you see yourself on the spectrum now?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Shana. I think, just looking at that graph and just hearing you talk about it, that feeling when you have excessive worry of being exhausted and feeling sluggish and weighed down. I have had times in life where I've felt that, and I could feel that when you were talking about it. I think right now, because things are coming at us so fast and it's, things just aren't slowing down, things keep changing with all the information and people not feeling well. I really slide back and forth on that spectrum. As much as I try to kind of keep in the middle, it does feel like with all of the change, it goes back and forth quite a bit these days, for sure.
I'm sure that we can probably all identify with that, sort of the feeling like 1 minute you're in one place and in the next minute you're in another. And the reality is that our external world, we're sort of talking about what's happening internally for us, but our external world is changing so rapidly, like you're describing as well. And so focusing on what's in our control involves using skills to help to ground us in these kind of emotional upheavals or these emotional storms. So to give an analogy, if you think about a massive storm blowing through a harbor, the boats are going to drop anchor. If they don't, they'll get swept out to sea and they won't be able to do much that's useful at that point. They won't be able to do what they're intended to do. So dropping anchor doesn't make the storm go away, but it can hold a boat steady in the harbor until the storm passes in its own time. So when we use this ACE cycle, that's part of this next piece of the FACE acronym, to drop anchor, even while the storm continues on, our mental and emotional resources get freed up just enough to help us make intentional decisions and help us to problem solve effectively, which is often what we really need to be able to do in a crisis or a difficult situation. So drop anchor includes acknowledging thoughts and feelings, acknowledging that the storm is here, outwardly, externally, but also certainly internally and inwardly. And we're not hiding from the storm or ignoring or trying to distract ourselves from the fact that it's here, but really acknowledging that it's here. And emotion is not good or bad, although during times like this, it tends to feel sort of bad, and we might kind of characterize it in that way. But the reality is that emotions themselves are neutral, but some of them are enjoyable to experience, and others can be uncomfortable and even painful. And during stress, particularly, emotions tend to come in rapid succession. So you might be really moving along that worry spectrum pretty quickly and tend to be mixed in with our thoughts and our worries. And so let's try noticing and acknowledging together now. And what this will look like is 1 minute of silence as much as you can achieve that and whatever is in front of you and whatever you are being asked to multitask in the moment, do the best that you can. Closing your eyes might help if you're comfortable and able to do that, but it's not required. So our job in acknowledging in this next minute is to notice our emotions. So emotions are things like anxiety, fear, joy, relief. And we're going to notice what's happening in our body. So physical sensations like muscle tension or a knot in our stomach. So whatever is showing up for you, you're going to notice it with a quality of kindness and curiosity. You're not going to take your harshest of critics into this minute as you notice, whatever it is that comes up for you. So let's start this minute together by taking a full breath in, only as deep as is comfortable for you, and a full exhale out. You might just allow your breath to find a normal rhythm. And now just begin to notice and tune into what you're feeling right now. Emotions are showing up. Whatever you notice, I'm going to allow it to be there. And notice and acknowledge that it's there. And then tune into any physical sensations in your body. And just acknowledge whatever is there. Allow it some space to be there. And now let's conclude this minute with another full breath in, again, only as deep as is comfortable for you. A full exhale out. Now I want to invite you to share what you're noticing. What was that experience like for you? Share a word or two or a phrase in the chat. And share with this community. And Ginger, I might ask you what you're noticing, or what you're sort of hearing from this conversation.
Well, while we wait to hear some from the chat, I mean, I can just say, naturally, we're on this call, we're presenting on the call, and that takes a certain energy. But just having that minute to like really sink in and do that breathing, it makes such a difference. And just for me, like, I know I felt some tension kind of in my shoulders, and like you were saying, just recognizing that that was there, but not necessarily getting totally stuck in that too, and in the narrative that may come along with it. Gosh, thank you so much for doing it. It looks like we do have some things in the chat to share. So someone says that they noticed their heart beating, which reminded them of the anxiety that they have. Others noticed gratitude, tension, some distraction, reminded them that it was hard to focus today, fear, which it seems like a lot of different people have. And then someone says that it was just nice to relax and be in that moment. Thank you so much, Shana. It seems like everyone really needed that time.
Yeah, and I thank you, all of you, for sharing. And I want to say that if you notice your heart racing or the tension, that you did that exercise perfectly. the idea is not to calm your mind. It is to notice what's there. And so exactly what many of you are describing, that often with fully acknowledging that, hey, there's a storm going on, we become aware of its intensity, or it becomes really obvious to us that our mind is not quiet and we're maybe, over into the red zone. And so the next piece of this, and you can kind of stay right here if you're still noticing that tension or fear come up, or even if you feel like you're sort of in a good place. Part of the next piece of this, coming back to your body, is the anchoring part. And this involves connecting with and exerting some control over your physical body. And there are lots of really simple ways to do this. So planting your feet on the ground or pushing your feet in the ground. And you can do these as I'm just very briefly describing them. If you're noticing lots of tension in a particular place, you can roll your shoulders, you can stretch, you can exert some physical control over that area. Or you could stretch another part of your body just to sort of shift your attention away to another part of your body. One that I like and that you can sort of do without people noticing, like if you're in the line at the grocery store and it's extremely anxiety provoking, you can press your fingertips together, and you can use a lot of pressure if you really need that anchoring. And so what's important to remember here is that you can do this as long as you need to do it until you feel like you have some grounding. So that might be 30 seconds at some points during the day, or you might need to do it for 5 minutes. Or if it's a day where there's a big storm kind of raging internally, you might need to dedicate a good, 15 minutes to kind of doing this to help you feel grounded. So as you acknowledge your thoughts and feelings, come back to your body, and then you're ready to engage in what you're doing. And so if you think about a crisis and you have, a leader or someone in charge, I'm thinking of like a military leader or something, they need to be able to focus. And so often in a crisis is when we need to quickly be able to focus and do what we need to do. And so engaging can help us to do that. Also, all of these skills that are part of the sort of ACE cycle are mindfulness skills. They're awareness building skills. And they do help us to anchor in emotional storms. And then we're ready and primed to engage and focus our attention on what we need to do. And this engagement piece right here can actually help to heighten our sense of enjoyment around small or simple things that we already do. So it seems odd, but even during a crisis, or maybe even more so during stress, we still need opportunities to be able to find a sense of enjoyment in whatever, way that might look. And so the easiest way to engage is to use your 5 senses. What you see, hear, touch, taste, and smell. So if you like to drink tea, for example, feeling the warm cup in your hands, smelling the aroma of the herbal tea, hearing the water as you sort of pour it into your cup. So you can take this into any activity and kind of heighten the sense of enjoyment that you get from doing things that matter to you. And so the idea here is that with engaging what you're doing, emotions are going to continue to ebb and flow. It's not about waiting for your mind to be calm, but rather gently over and over bringing your attention back, even as your thoughts remain present with you or your emotions remain present with you. And so while there are no rules for this cycle or sort of this FACE COVID acronym, the ACE cycle, any part of it or all of it used together, can really prime you to be ready to do what you need to do and what's important to you. And Stephanie's going to tell us more about that and talking about committed action.
Thank you, Shana. Well, it certainly feels easier to commit to things when the waters are calm and steady, right? The ACE steps can help us get to more steady and calm waters. And sometimes, frankly, the waters are just choppy and rough. And we still have responsibilities that are important for us to do. During COVID-19, our lives are not on pause. Most of our responsibilities have stayed the same, if not amplified. Each day gives us the opportunity to start something, finish something, and make us feel like at the end of the day and throughout the day that what we're doing is worthwhile. What we're doing is meaningful to us. And when we do things that are important to us, that matter to us, it makes our lives feel like they are worth living. It brings us a sense of control when things feel out of control, and it brings a sense of power to us when we feel powerless. So what we can ask ourselves is, what do I want to do with the time that I have? What is important to me? Committing to doing things can include things like protective measures right now, really good hand washing, really good physical distancing, taking care of ourselves, taking care of our loved ones. It can also be committing to things like journaling, scheduling an appointment with our therapist, meal planning, going on walks, drinking more water, drinking less alcohol, or whatever is needed in our lives. When we fulfill these commitments that are important to us, that make us feel proud, it helps us come into contact with the experience that we can have these hard, rough thoughts and feelings, and we can still do the things that matter to us at the same time. So just like CF, COVID does not have to control what the day looks like. It does not have to control you. We can continue to commit to doing things that are helpful to us and in our control. So Ginger, what actions do you feel like you have purposefully been doing during this time, and what came of it?
So for me, I really have to remind myself to breathe, which sounds like, that should be automatic. And I do breathe automatically. But the kinds of breaths that I need to be taking so that I'm not breath holding, I have to remind myself to do that. I talked about when Shana did the exercise earlier about some of that kind of like tension in my shoulders. Sometimes when I notice that, I really have to remember, to take that breath, to slow myself down, so that I can be present and not 100 miles a minute. So I've been doing that, and it does make me feel better that I remember to do that for myself, and I remember to do it for the people around me too. I think helps me to be a better mother when I can slow myself down. So I think breathing, as simple as it sounds, has been really important during this time.
Well, thank you, Ginger. And I think, what you said moves really nicely with what Shana was saying earlier too, which is, when things are hard, sometimes we think we have to make these big, gigantic, overwhelming changes to our lives. And it doesn't always have to be like that, right? So just simply saying, I deserve this minute of pause. I deserve these 5 seconds of pause to reorient myself so that I can do the things that I want to do and not feel yanked and tugged all over the place by the stress and the anxiety that's happening right now. So thank you. We will transition now to the O of the FACE COVID acronym, and O stands for opening up. Opening up to things that feel good or that we expected to happen, usually pretty easy. But when things unexpected happen or things that are unpleasant are happening, we tend to close up like a clam to protect ourselves, to shelter ourselves. We try to escape, we try to hide, we try to avoid it, we tense up. Our bodies are designed to do that. It's a form of self-preservation and protection. It's normal, and it can also be really helpful sometimes. Opening up means making space and acknowledging that there are things happening right now that we frankly cannot control, like the loneliness of physical distancing, frustration about not being able to physically distance because your job requires you to be in person, missing out on big milestones like prom and graduation and sporting events, being annoyed as all get out with family members that you've been cooped up with for weeks, fear of getting sick and needing to be hospitalized, unemployment, financial instability. All of these things can be desperately overwhelming to us right now. So opening up is a form of self-care. It's an acknowledgement that we feel how we feel and we think how we think. So let's try a metaphor. The alternative to opening up is feeling like we are in a tug of war. So imagine some of these thoughts and feelings that you're having right now that you really, really don't want. And you're in a boxing ring with them, you're in a tug of war with them. And the more that you try to pull away, the tighter the knot gets, the tighter the grip gets. So not only is it harder for us to feel like we are getting away, but it also feels like we're getting a little bit more beat up by them in the process. It's not our fault what our mind and our body does. So let's take a minute to identify some of the thoughts and feelings that are showing up for us right now that we just don't want. And you can always feel free to enter those into the chat if you feel comfortable. Without the opening up, without the rest of the steps, without being able to practice and develop the skill, the rest of the steps are going to be a little bit harder. So this is where we can use that ACE cycle again to get us more comfortable and better practice with this opening up. The V stands for values. Basically, what do we want to stand for during COVID? Imagine what your t-shirt would say if you could personalize it. Think something like, I learned to knit during COVID. I finally planted my arugula I've been wanting to plant. I actually went to bed at a time where I felt like a human in the morning. Sometimes when we feel the most stuck is when we are the furthest away from ourselves. Alternatively, we feel the most reassured and confident when we are doing the things that rejuvenate us and make life feel worthwhile. Values also drive our hard work and persistence when times get tough. So I think, speaking fairly confidently, that most of us are desperately overwhelmed with the idea of wiping down groceries and putting them away, right? And if we think about why we're doing that and what's important to us about that, it is that we're trying to keep ourselves and our loved ones as healthy as possible. And there's a great sense of reassurance and relief that when we are pulling things out of the cupboard and making dinner, that we can sigh a sign of a feeling of relief that things are less contaminated, right? That there's a purpose for all of that hard work and that we can prepare those meals with less worry. Okay, so let's think about this. What do you want? If you could design your t-shirt, what do you want it to say for you? Take a minute, let us know in the chat what you would like on your t-shirt. In the meantime, I will tell you what I would like on mine. And that would be that it's really important to me to be obedient to the physical distancing, as hard as it is for this extrovert. I feel very strongly about the importance of physical distancing to keep people, not just myself and my family safe, but just our larger population safe. And if I can have one little drop in the ocean of contribution to that, that's deeply important to me. I would also like to have a little space on my personalized t-shirt that said, my son thought we had fun during our COVID precautions. Ginger, how about you?
So it's interesting that you mentioned being an extrovert, because I sometimes have a tendency to be a bit of introverted extrovert. So I think I would like my t-shirt to say that I stayed connected in whatever ways I can, that I stayed connected to my CF community, to my friends, to my family, and just created that sense of community, even though we are in a time of physical distancing. What about you, Shana?
Well, I think when looking back on this, the front of my t-shirt will say, I did a live recorded event for the first time, and not in the absence of anxiety. And I know that people can't see me, but I'm standing up so that I can stay grounded. And I think the back of my t-shirt would say that I asked for help. I'm a really independent sort of spirit, I guess. And, this has required me to ask for help and to, I want to be open to that. And all of that stems from wanting to care for myself and to care for others, those big values that are important to me.
So we have some really good ones in the chat if you'd like for me to share those. Okay.
Yes.
So I see I am blessed that my wife is a germaphobe. This is a good one. I kicked COVID's ass. And I kicked COVID's butt from someone else. One moment at a time. Staying in the present. I found strength I didn't know I had. Stayed in touch no matter the distance. Our marriage survived COVID. The world now knows what it feels like to have CF. 6 feet apart, sanitizing, and worrying that a germ will permanently reduce lung function. And another one. I have opened the doors to my creative side.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, and one more. And New York apparently has the right way to go. I am doing this for blank. insert name. So thanks for sharing.
Thank you, everybody. The I of the FACE COVID stands for identifying resources. We can think about resources being in two main buckets. One bucket are the practical resources, the things that you can sort of check a box on, things like paying bills, things like making meals, getting groceries, completing daily chores, cleaning equipment, making phone calls. Emotional support comes in the form of relationship and having the support that we need emotionally to feel connected and understood by people and to feel cheered for. Identifying what we need and who can provide that can be really, really challenging a lot of the time. It's not a skill that a lot of us are really, really comfortable with. Asking for help is especially challenging when we're overwhelmed and struggling. It's like I can't even get organized enough to let people know what I need. There are many sources of support available right now. They may come in different forms than we're typically used to them coming in. They may come more via telephone or via video technology, but we know that staying connected is more important now than ever. Support can come from our medical teams, our communities, spiritual communities, friends, family, and of course, we lean on the CF Foundation. In fact, the CF Foundation is now providing weekly updates during COVID, and tonight we gather together to try to support each other and find ways to cope with and manage the stress. Also, many mental health providers have transitioned to using telemedicine during COVID, which helps with infection risk. It also reduces some of the barriers of geography and travel and those sorts of things. There are lots and lots of local, state, and national resources available now for some of those practical concerns that people are experiencing that are very stressful. And then, of course, we always hope that you feel comfortable reaching out to your CF Center social worker if you need specific practical resources, specific resources and emotional support. We'll talk a little bit more about some other resources, but obviously the CF Foundation has CF Peer Connect. We also have Compass, and Ginger will talk more about those. Disinfect and distance is the D. As we've already talked about a little bit, people with CF have remarkably impressive skills in the area of disinfecting and distancing that people with CF and in these communities do not have. It's really important, though, that we don't equate that and assume that this is easy right now, because we know it's actually harder, because the amount of disinfection, the risk of infection, the intensity of the physical distancing is unlike anything that we've ever seen before. So we appreciate that the precautions that are being taken now are at a whole new level. And that can be especially lonely and especially distressing. And when all of that kicks in, we recommend going right back to those ACE steps to help ground us and manage the best we can the stress with those pressures. So that concludes our walk through the FACE COVID structure. Dr. Harris has also really cool and impressive animated video to go along with the printed FACE COVID materials that we will provide at the end of our time together. We will now transition to our Q&A time. We would love to hear from you about your emotional wellness at this time.
So if everyone wants to type in their questions, we'll start taking those. To start, though, we do have one question, and it says, and this is for Stephanie, do you have recommendations on how we could connect with a small group of CF patients to support one another? For example, I would like to connect with 4 to 5 people who are 40 years old-ish who have mild, moderate CF for video calls.
I think, one, it's really impressive to know exactly what you want. So that's step one. Step two is asking for help, which you also did. Step three is where we make sure that we get you connected with the right person who can get you exactly what you want. And I think that the CF Peer Connect is probably one of our best vehicles for doing exactly what you're asking for now. The other thing I would say is that I would love for you to spend some time thinking about what specific kinds of support you would want to get from that group of people that you described so that you can get it. Because you're the expert and only you know what you need and what you want to get out of that. So I'm excited for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Stephanie.
Mm-hmm.
A reminder that we do have BreatheCon in September that you could also log on to. Not a small group, but a group. Okay, let's see. Shana, we have a question for you. How do you take the political aspect out of worry?
I think that's a really good question. And I think that we're probably all asking how we can do that, right? Wouldn't it be nice if we could just extricate it out, right? My first thought is that one way to approach it is, well, we can't change the reality of how some of this is playing out. What's in our control is our ability to contain, how we're exposed to that, and to monitor how that impacts us. So with that acknowledgement, if you know that hearing the news for more than 5 minutes kind of sends you out to sea, kind of going with our metaphor, then that might be too much. And so using what you can do to contain that, come back to the ACE cycle. And my other thought would be that it's okay if that's the worry that shows up. You don't have to struggle with, gosh, I wish I could stop thinking about politics. Sort of like Stephanie was talking about, you don't have to get in that tug of war with the fact that that's some of what you think about. You can kind of open up, acknowledge that that's there, even though you don't want it to be there. You can ground yourself, and then you can decide, what is it that I need to do right now to re-engage in a way that's helpful and workable for me.
Thanks so much, Shana. Stephanie, another question for you. What advice do you have to bring some of these skills to the loved ones in my life who may not be as open to mindfulness techniques?
That actually is something that we talked about as a group the last few days is, words are powerful, right? And so when someone says mindfulness, that might trigger thoughts of, I want to do mindfulness for some people. And the word mindfulness may trigger thoughts of mindfulness is garbage, and it's just something that people called something that's been around for a long time and it doesn't work, right? It's just true, right? And so I think it's a great question. So I would just say to lean into your relationship with the people that you want to have understand you. And maybe you take the word mindfulness out of it, but what you say instead is, I'm going to work on moving my body and mind to the here and now, because I don't have a crystal ball. I personally don't want a crystal ball right now. I'm glad I don't have one. I don't want one. And it allows you to say, I'm here right now. What do I want to do with this time? Anxiety is sometimes our friend. It can be helpful, and sometimes it's desperately obnoxious, and it is a pest, and it tricks us into believing that if we don't worry about or think about the worry, that something is definitely going to happen and it's going to be catastrophic. The reality is that things are going to play out however they play out. A little bit of problem solving may be helpful, and it may not. So to get people on board, use your relationship. Have them try it out with you. Use different words that might connect with them a little bit better so that they can support you. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Shana, someone has a question. Do you think the primal fear or anxiety after the pandemic will cause a new pandemic of severe chronic stress?
I think that is a very real possibility. And this is why we're here right now. This is what we're doing right here, and how we're talking and how we're connecting, and how Stephanie kind of alluded to language. We're kind of putting some words around trying to organize, what is happening in our world. And what we're doing right now, our hope, and really I think what we would expect, is that being able to do this, and for you to take some of these things and to continue them on, will kind of help you weather the storm, but also on the other side of it, have sort of built your resilience muscle. Every time you use these skills, you build these muscles that you have. You have a resilience muscle, and you have a mindfulness muscle. It is a skill that our mind, every person's mind, is able to do. It's just a matter of if we know how to use it and we know how to exercise it. So I do think that's a reality. I think we're just kind of across the nation, we're seeing the mental health community really rise up to this. And, the behavioral health community has been equipped with telehealth for a long time. And so I think that mental health providers are prepared to, to help people through this. And my other thought would be, if that's what you need, and many of us do, then don't hesitate to reach out and ask for help.
Thanks, Shana. All right, we have time for one more question. So, Stephanie, I think this is one we can all understand. Someone says, I've noticed the news and social media stresses me out, but how can I disconnect without feeling completely uninformed?
Well, I think we can look to values, which is to say, you care about your well-being enough to know that you have a limit, and you also care about being informed. One of the things I like to think about is, do something until it works, and then when it stops working, stop doing it. So it's sort of saying, get enough information to be able to guide your committed action. And then once that bucket is full, and you say, I know all the information that I need to make informed decisions, that don't tip my anxiety way on the other side of the fence. And you say, I've achieved my goal. But we won't know that until we try and something goes right and or something does not go the way we want. We're going to make mistakes to figure out where this balance is. And that's a really important, normal part of learning about ourselves.
Okay, we have one more question that is pressing. Apparently, a lot of people have this question. So, Shana, how about you take this one? Someone says, "How do you stay motivated during this time and not binge watch on the couch all day? Any tips?"
Yeah, I hear you. I hear that. I think there's a real weightiness to a lot of what we're experiencing emotionally. You may have heard some conversation on social media about like collective grief, which the CF community is not unfamiliar with, but this is on a much, much bigger scale. And so I think in some ways acknowledging, because it feels kind of like, what is that thing, that feels heavy and that so I think acknowledging that and giving yourself space to just feel that, whatever that is. And then I think that during this time too, there's a lot of readjusting around expectations. So early in our conversation, we talked about flexibility. So, what you might have been achieving before this, incredibly stressful time, what those expectations are might need to be flexible and still consistent with what you value, So being flexible, giving yourself permission where it's workable and where it's helpful. But I think some of maybe what's coming out of this question is, I don't know if that feels so good for me to binge watch all the time, is what I wonder. And to me, that says that there's something else that matters to you that maybe you'd like to see yourself doing instead. And so I think that's the question to kind of take with you is, what is it that's important to me? What do I want to be about in this time that seems obscure and kind of chaotic? And then the last thing I would say is, I think extending some compassion to yourself and some kindness to yourself while kind of holding yourself to what is it that I really want to see myself do that's of value to me during this time.
Thank you. So as we near the end of the event, we have a minute, but I just wondered, Shana and Stephanie, do you have any closing comments that you want to add for the group?
I would just express my pride for all of us for carving out this hour when other things could have been crowding it in, but we made space for this time. And I'm just wishing everyone the greatest health right now.
And yes, so I completely agree with Stephanie. And since we were just sort of talking about kind of coming back to our values, I think now is a time to ask, hearing what you've heard and hearing and processing with this community, kind of asking yourself and taking with you, what am I willing to commit to myself to do to simply and incrementally support my emotional health? And I just, again, want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to share this space with you all.
Thank you. Thank you to Stephanie, Shana, Melissa, Chad, and the entire Mental Health Advisory Committee who continues to work on your behalf. Individuals with CF, families, care teams, and our larger CF community. What I've taken from tonight's discussion is to remember that it's okay to accept that things are going to be both good and bad. Life does not happen set to one channel. And right now, globally, it kind of feels like we're channel surfing. So it's okay to have a day with high and low moments. We are in this together. And having good, reliable resources helps with that. We will be emailing out a link to all of these resources we shared during our discussion, including the Face COVID video. And you can also find other tips for dealing with anxiety on cff.org under the Life with CF tab, and then the Emotional Wellness section. And here on the slides, you see some other resources as well. So thank you again for joining us tonight. Stay safe and well. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.